It's that time again for the Webquay Supply Road Call-In Show with your hosts, Mike and Don. Call in and we're going to answer your questions live. And now, it's time for Mike and Don.
Welcome. Don Parkinson here with my co-host, Michael Fox. Mike, how are you this week?
I'm doing okay, thank you. Great to be here again.
Great to be here. This is going to be an interesting week, I think. I'm going to talk a bit about socioeconomic impact analysis, and I've got some good music chosen too, so I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Just for our listening audience there, the toll-free number, and it's a phone-in show for the Webquay Supply Road. The number is 833-513-1223. Again, 833-513-1223. And it's a toll-free number. And please follow us on social media at hashtag WFN Supply Road. Again, hashtag WFN Supply Road. We welcome followers and fans for this project, and we'll learn more about this as we do these radio shows. So, interesting topic today.
Yes, big topic. Mike, maybe we'll kick things off by asking the question: what is socioeconomics, and why is it an important part of an environmental assessment?
Yeah, it sounds like a fancy word, socioeconomics.
Yeah, it is a big word, isn't it?
It's really about the human environment. When we say environmental assessment, we look at the animal environment and sometimes the vegetation, the forest and water, etc. But in this case, it's really focused on the human beings within the project scope and study area. And with socioeconomic component of the environmental system, we try to figure out the social and economic conditions of a community being affected by a development project, which in this case is the Supply Road. So one of the things we look at when we're looking at the social economic conditions in the communities are things like, for example, income levels, employment rates, educational opportunities, access to social services, housing availability, etc., and then figure out how these things might be affected by the Supply Road in the future. So that includes both pre-construction, construction, and operations. So, what's the existing conditions in the communities that we're
so the baseline, really, Mike?
Yeah.
So it's like the same thing we do with the natural environment, but with the human environment, I guess. Yeah.
No, that's exactly it. It's a snapshot in time.
Yep.
And then they look at different elements of it, the criteria or indicators, and how they measure changes over time. So maybe increase in employment, or they may look at maybe a decrease in crime or increase in crime, or an increase in training and education opportunities and stuff like that. So it's both positive and negative.
Mike, just one thing there. When you talk about criteria and indicators, criteria are the things that are important, right? That are valued by people, for example. And then the indicators, I think, are the ways of measuring those important things, right?
That's correct. And so we look for input too from the communities. What's important to them. So there's a lot of these environmental assessments are done in the mainstream, and because of the kind of unique situation of this remote setting where most of the communities are indigenous, so we look for dimensions that they feel like there's some value that may take into consideration of socioeconomics.
What are some examples of positive potential impacts or benefits from, would you say, Mike?
Yeah, so again, it all depends on the community. So if you're looking for increased training or increased jobs, increased business contracts, increased maybe better access to hospitals or schooling through being connected to a road. Maybe there's, the corridor itself, like the road corridor can facilitate maybe even power lines maybe in the future or fiber optics, which I think they're dealing with now. Or it can improve access to your neighbors, and visiting people.
Yes.
So that's some dimensions that could be deemed positive. And the social, in terms of negative things, could be, having more outsiders in the area. You could have more sports hunters or anglers coming up if it's not controlled correctly. There could be the potential for, more drug trafficking, that puts pressure on the police. So there are real things when it comes to negative impacts that take into consideration. And it's not just for the communities; it's for all the agencies that are involved in. So, like Anishinaabe Police Services, if there is a connected road or there's access to road, right now most of the vehicle, there's a lot of people who are unlicensed, uninsured, and not registered vehicles. So once you get off the reserve, if they're not following the Highway Traffic Act, and then it's got, that's an impact where suddenly they may have to get their license. They may have to, get insurance and register the cars and follow the regulations that'll be set up for this road. So the road's designed to, it takes into consideration not just the terrain but public safety. And the speed of the road and what's going to be the kilometers per hour on certain sections. So those are the things that they kind of take in consideration when it comes to human impacts, both positive and negative.
There's a lot of factors to consider there, Mike. I mean, like you said, you've got to look at the good and the bad when you go through this process. And on other projects, we've looked at these as well for all season roads, and it's interesting. A lot of the concerns that community members do have. There's things that we didn't anticipate initially, and we ended up, revealing over time a lot of the concerns that community members had, whether it was, like you said, security and safety and more people entering their traditional homeland and affecting their way of life, right? Like you said, more hunting and fishing intensity, which can impact, their rights, basically. So anyhow, I think, Mike, it's time for some music. Do you want to be the first one?
Oh,
I mean, I can if you want. I've got some in the hopper here, but if you like,
I have a song here. How Do You Like Me Now? By The Heavy. The Heavy is an English band formed in 2007. It's kind of a mix, alternative rock, blues rock, funk rock. It's very distinct music there. So that's the song. How Do You Like Me Now?
I couldn't
Okay, we're back. That was a good call, Mike. That was really good. I was saying during the while the music was playing there that that song could have come out of the '60s, eh? Just the style of it.
Yeah,
it's really, really powerful. Anyhow, I thought let's move on now to talk a little bit about criteria and indicators again, just in a little bit more detail this time. Mike, what are they? Why do they need to be identified? And how are they being used?
Yeah, it's a little abstract for some people. What do you mean by criteria and indicators? And so criteria is basically what are the things that we're looking at that people value, and which can be affected by the supply road. So, I mean, these could be social, economic, health, or cultural criteria or values, which when we talk about the human environment. So an economic activity could be an example of a socioeconomic criteria. So an indicator of an economic activity is how are we going to measure that change over time. For example, employment rates, community employment rates, or number of band-owned enterprises. So it's looking at a certain dimension around the human environment, and trying to figure, okay, how do you put parameters around that?
Yeah.
And then how do we measure that over time in terms of positive or negative impacts? And that's why it's important, for Indigenous communities, that reviewed the proposed terms of reference, and put, to review, we have our views, what we think are the value components, when it comes to the socioeconomic environment, and then having, the communities review that, offer their insights and their set of values that we may have missed.
Yeah.
And then indicators to measure those things. So that's why the tour phase was really, really important, to get community feedback on that, and to get communities to understand it. Environmental assessments are complex phenomena. Like they're very complicated exercises, and there's a lot of science, a lot of interactive science around it, and so we're doing our best to try, just like the show and just like the fact sheets and our websites and social media, we do our best to explain, some of the basic functions and purpose and process associated with environmental assessment. So criteria and indicators are just that. What are we valuing? How do you measure it?
And I guess one thing I wanted to add, Mike, was that during the terms of reference phase of the environmental assessment, those criteria and indicators are preliminary ones. So when you start actually doing the work, the environmental assessment work, after the terms of reference is approved, that may reveal some additional criteria and indicators, right? That's just part of the process. You don't know the answer, all the answers right away. You do the work, and then it reveals. Community members over time may say, oh no, this is important to us, because they put more time and more thought into it, and as a result they've identified things that they didn't think about before that are valuable to them, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind. Well, I think I'd like to play some music myself. I'm going to try and I think we're going to go with the same theme that you started off there with, Mike, a very high energy song. This one is Mr. Brightside by the Killers. It's certainly not a slow song. So it follows along with Mike's choice earlier, and we're good to go. So we'll talk to you in a minute.
Coming out of my cage and I've been doing just fine. Gotta be down because I want it all. It started out with a kiss, how did it end up like this? It was only a kiss, it was only a kiss. Now I'm falling asleep and she's calling a cab while he's having a smoke and she's taking a drag. Now they're going to bed and my stomach is sick and it's all in my head, but she's touching
Okay, we're back. Tried to keep the energy levels high with that song choice. So, Mike, let's continue on with our discussion about socioeconomic impact assessment. So, how do you get the information that you need to do the impact assessment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me just collect my thoughts here. I mean, we'll be collecting information a number of different ways. So we'll be sure to get all the information that we need to do the assessment with as much community help as possible. So first, we look for what information is already available through recent community documents, such as comprehensive community plans or land use plans or economic development plans available. We look at StatsCan census, recent data sets, usually, in the last 5 years, but it's better to have the last few years, preferably, when it comes to data sets. We're looking to search for what's already there in terms of indicators. We need to do the assessments, such as education levels, sometimes housing conditions. If we get housing reports, etc. That's just the start. So that's what we call secondary sources for those academics among us. And then there's the not so direct information from the community. So you might find gaps, in our assessment, information that's missing. Some of this information might need updating, so it's a bit dated. It all depends on the, when the document was completed. For some folks, comprehensive community plan may have been done just a few years ago. Land use planning might have been, several years ago. So we want to make sure that what we're receiving has some relevance and it's current enough for the assessment. Communities, the other ways, more direct ways, I guess, community members would be asked if they can complete a survey. So we're going to have some pretty comprehensive surveys for the socioeconomic impact assessment, as well as human health impact assessment. So that's one way of getting what they call primary data for the socioeconomic assessment. The other way is through focus groups. So you can participate. I've been fortunate enough in my career. I've been asked to participate in focus groups, not facilitate one. I've facilitated focus groups, but to actually participate in one is different. So you're not really sure what the questions are going to be asked, and it's usually in a small group where the facilitator or whoever's doing the focus group asks certain questions, and it's a kind of a largely an open-ended question sometimes, just to get a more of a qualitative view of the participants. So the focus groups are essentially group interviews with diverse members. So they'll be targeting women and youth and elders and land users for the focus groups. And that focus groups may take on different ways. So it may be online, it may be video or teleconferences, different ways to do focus groups. Because of the COVID situation, we may end up doing those other alternative ways to do the focus groups. One of the really key ones is what they call key informant interviews. So these are folks that are, I would say they're like community specialists. So they could be the director of education, director of social services. These folks, director of housing, like these folks that's their day-to-day work. And they actually know sort of the micro rhythms of their programs, and so these key informant interviews will totally help flesh out some of the questions that be asked, but like from their perspective, as someone who manages programs or manages whole departments in some cases, and big departments. Like health is a big department.
Yes.
Just like Ontario, right? Ontario's budget, half of Ontario's budget's healthcare.
Yes, yeah. But those specialists in healthcare, for example, they provide so much insight, right, in terms of what the conditions are in terms of people's health in the community, right? Is there a high incidence of diabetes or obesity, or what is that picture? These are practitioners, right? They're working every day in that field in the community. So they're, like you said, they're so valuable, those key informant interviews, aren't they?
Yeah, and they may have their own views of what a road can do. You know, maybe, you know, we've heard some stories when we were doing our other previous studies in the remote areas where patients had to go, but because of the fog or the weather, inclement weather, that they couldn't get, the planes couldn't land to mobilize the patients, and so road, you know, at that point, I remember the nurse saying, you know, if we had a road, we could have gone with the lookout.
Yes.
You know, 2 days earlier, then they had to wait for the plane. So it's those views, and you know, getting to think that, you know, it's, you know, what a road can bring, you know, in terms of facilitating their work.
Well, Mike, tell me a bit more about these surveys. What kind of information are you looking to collect as part of these surveys?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of levels of information. We're looking to collect data and information on demographics, which is another fancy word. It just means like your age, your gender, your marital status. Information around access, the access to education or traditional education. You know, is it easy? Is it hard? Is it there are, is it facilitated or frustrated? That type of thing. So we also look for training and skill levels, types of employment interests, opportunities and barriers to employment. So you may have an interest, but there actually may be real world barriers in place.
Yeah.
You know, it could be, you know, maybe it's a single mom that needs childcare. You know, that she's really ambitious and may want to get into getting a trade or a certificate or a diploma or degree, but childcare is a barrier for her. Like there's not enough childcare. So we look for things like that. Living costs. You know, what is the cost of living in a remote area? Like again, I'm not just focusing on remotes here, but because the majority of the communities that we have to engage in are remotes, the social connections. As well as the availability of transportation. And then, you know, in their sense of safety, you know, the overall sense of safety. I mean, in some communities, you know, they, it could be, the reserve dogs. That may not give them a sense of safety because they're not regulated, right? There's no, not tied up and stuff like that. Or it could be, they wish you had more traffic lights or signs, stop signs or something. So safety is a general concept that we also explore when it comes to the socioeconomic assessment surveys.
No, there's a lot of information that we want to collect as part of these surveys for sure. Maybe you can shed some light on how the surveys will be conducted, Mike. Yeah,
so it's going to be conducted in a number of different ways. Because of COVID, typically there's a full-on suite of techniques and approaches. But because of COVID, we're kind of modifying the approach here until the vaccination is widespread and communities feel more open to allowing people to come. So there's going to be online approaches. So if community members are able to prefer to do online because of COVID, they can do so. Though we realize that might be possible for everybody. We all know about the connectivity issues in a lot of these communities, but it's going to be a real option. Online surveys, or even online focus groups. We know people are taking classes online. We know that meetings are being conducted online through Zoom, through Teams, and other such platforms. So we will offer that as well. The focus group on using those online platforms. We can actually go back to old school phones. We've had group meetings. We still have group meetings, council meetings to the phone. That people come to the chambers and we have 6-8 people. That's a focus group right there. And help. Getting a local person to help us identify the people that would be interested in the focus groups. So, if we're trying to get women, then we'll get 6-8 women who are interested in the road project, and we'll have a conversation, on the phone about these set of, about the road and questions around the road. We may look at a coordinator, local coordinator, someone from the community that lives in the community, and actually do door-to-door survey. Weatherquay likely will end up doing that, and we'll train them up and provide some guidance on the survey and translation, et cetera, and put a local team together to go door-to-door survey. And then, incentivizing people to fill out the surveys as well, either online or going door-to-door hard copies with maybe some some prizes, for that. So yeah, it's quite the exercise. It really is. We're not just looking at Weatherquay. We're looking at a whole list of communities that we're trying to get people to participate in on the surveys.
The other question I guess that this brings up is are you targeting specific community members with the surveys? Tell me a little bit more about that, Mike.
Yeah, so we're trying to get a range of voices and views. So it's not just going to be men filling this out. We're hoping, men and women, elders and youth, land users and water users and harvesters, et cetera. So we're hoping to get a balanced section of the community to participate. The reason why that's important is because something new has been legislated under the Impact Assessment Act. It's called the Gender-Based Analysis Plus. So essentially, it's sort of a requirement to ensure proponents across Canada get a diverse range of views and members participating in the project. Sometimes they're called more vulnerable members of the communities. So it could be women or single women or sickly elders or folk that are typically not as active in these public surveys or public interactions
because they have other responsibilities.
Exactly. And it's hard for to bring 2, 3, 4 kids. I know because I had 3 kids and trying to bring them to certain functions. It just wasn't practical. That's
so true. Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on something there, Mike, with this Gender-Based Analysis Plus. It's to try to ensure that no group is left behind, right? No voice is left unheard, really, right? It's to make sure that the surveys are as representative of the people and the community as they can be, right? Because, like you said, typically many of the many community meetings might not have a broad range of people, right? Whether it's age groups or all men or and not very many women. So it's to try and get the greatest representation as possible. Are we ready for another musical selection?
Yes. I'm going to stick with the same band.
Oh.
There's another song I enjoy from them called Shortchange Hero. I say this because sometimes we get people coming to communities think they're going to save the day, and we said there's no heroes here. It takes a lot of work to improve the quality of life in communities. Change here.
to stop you falling from your ladder. 'Cause this ain't no place for no hero. This ain't no place for no better man. This ain't no place for no hero who come home. This ain't no place for no hero. This ain't no place for no better man. This ain't no place for no hero who come home. Yes, this ain't no place for no hero. This ain't no place for no better man. This ain't no place for no hero who come home.
Okay, that was another great selection, Mike. Wow, I haven't heard that one before. But I think I've heard it in movies, that song. Yeah, definitely in movies. But anyhow, back to gender-based analysis, Mike. Let's go into a little bit more detail on that in terms of why it's important.
Yeah, so again, it's important that we capture the voices and perspectives of different diverse groups of people, groups in a community. So people can experience things differently based on age, sex, physical disability, or mental disability. So, sociologists call them sort of vulnerable groups within the population. And their views and voices aren't necessarily heard. It's actually a point of privilege to actually participate
Yes.
in these public forums, right, or community meetings. So it assumes you have the freedom, the mobility, et cetera, and access to get to these
So
places.
true.
So it's really important that we capture those that are often not heard. Basically around that. So, and what their views are on the supply road. Maybe they may have very specific concerns around it, right? Or they may have specific opportunities they want to share around it.
No, that's it is important. I think this gender-based analysis, being able to look at things through different lenses is really important, and I think that's really what it boils down to, gender-based analysis. So, you mentioned about trying to do some interviews with band administration and staff. Do you want to maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So part of the approaches to dealing with socioeconomic is what they call key informant interviews, and so these folks have work with different dimensions, like human dimensions, whether that's healthcare or social services. So we want to know, what level of services are being provided. Are they at full capacity? Or are they under-resourced? Is it easy to access? Or what? Just all these different questions that they see as someone running a program or running a department, and that if they had, and we ask around, would the road help with that, or would the road hurt with that, right? And so we won't know until we have the interviews and what are their how do they see the the project from their perspective, either from their clients or from their patients or the views to work with in the communities.
What kinds of impacts, Mike, would you be looking at as part of the socioeconomic impact analysis?
Yeah, so I mean, again, we there's again both positive and negative impacts. So from a positive effects or benefits, Again, it goes back to increased training of certifications, education levels, employment, and economic. So that could be heavy equipment operators, environmental monitoring or catering or camp operation. I mean, there's a whole roster of occupations associated with this that will be identified as the EA is unfolds. So we look at the positive aspects around that. One of the challenges, Don, with this is we're not here to promote the road.
That's so true.
We're conducting an environmental assessment that, that's factual and ground truth around what is going to be the positive and what's going to be the negative. And so we're asking the community what they think the positives will be. So if they think, be more business opportunities along the road, whether it's gas station or restaurants, whether they'll provide a future opportunities for the current youth that are in school. They look at 5 years, 7, 10 years out where they become adults. And so, but at the same time, they look at the negative. Will there be more drugs and alcohol? We've heard that before, and maybe higher crime rates, or maybe more violence against women, traffic accidents, etc. So both impacts on the programs that help with those type of things, right? And that's why it's all kind of interrelated. It's hard to separate the economic from the social, from the health, from the cultural, but we're going to do our best to capture all those views.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there, Mike. In terms of benefits and positive effects and negative effects, right? And like you said, it's not our role. We're not here to promote the road. We're here to conduct the environmental assessment, and it's a clinical exercise, right? It's focused on collecting information and assessing that information in an objective, fair-minded manner, right? I mean, the community is going through their own. They're doing their own assessment, right? There's a federal process, there's a provincial process, and then there's the community process, and they're going through their own decision-making process themselves, aren't they?
That's right. I mean, you hear this from the leadership of Webequie all the time. They're embarking on this environmental assessment in order to generate information to make an informed decision. There's a lot of questions being asked by the membership and others, and the only way you can answer those questions is study it.
Yes.
Right, and so that's the whole purpose. We're studying so we can generate the information so the leadership and the membership can make an informed decision about the next phase.
And there are other very important valued components that could be impacted. Cultural, there could be cultural impacts, or traditional land use impacts, and health impacts, right? All these things it's so wide ranging, isn't it?
Yes, and that's why it's important to have, like we've been doing, Webequie members being part of the field studies, field planning, and continuing participation throughout the whole process, because what's unique about this project was that normally a proponent, usually an outside proponent, has a project and that project footprint, and then they ask about traditional knowledge or Indigenous knowledge. In this case, Indigenous knowledge helps shape where the corridor or the road is going to be headed. That doesn't take away from the fact that we'll be looking at any impacts on what the road may have on traditional ideas. So it could be changes in access to harvesting areas. It could be it's going to facilitate access or may frustrate access to those harvesting areas. Could be loss of sacred sites, as maybe burial sites along the way. We won't know, as the project proceeds. It could be some teaching or ceremonial sites that may be along the road. And there's also what we don't think about this normally in the mainstream, but there are actually noise studies being conducted and what they call aesthetics. So, like, are there visual disturbances? You know, you don't really think about that, you know, in the remote area, but we actually are doing those noise studies and visuals and dust and all that kind of stuff. So those are the things that I'll take into consideration around a range of impacts.
Yes.
You know, and then what are the mitigation measures around that? Which is the whole point, is to come up what are the impacts and what are the possible mitigation measures to manage those impacts.
I think I'm ready to select another song, Mike. I'm going to slow things down, turn back the clock here, and I've got something which might be a little interesting and to some people. It's by Glenn Campbell. It's called By the Time I Get to Phoenix. I think everyone's heard this one before, I think. It's a great country tune, I guess. Mike, would you call it a country tune?
Probably, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Phoenix for a while, but
No.
I'd like to head down there. It's good country.
It is. Okay.
By the time I get to Phoenix, she'll be rising. She'll find the note I left hanging on her door. She'll laugh when she reads the part that says I'm leaving. 'Cause I've left that girl so many times before. By the time I make Albuquerque, she'll be working. She'll probably stop at lunch and give me a call. But she'll just hear that phone keep on ringing off the wall. That's all. By the time I make Oklahoma, she'll be sleeping. She'll turn softly and call my name out low. And she'll cry just to think I'd really leave her. Though time and time I've tried to tell her so. She just didn't know I would really go.
Okay, I really turned back the clock on that one, didn't I, Mike? That's generated quite a response, I've noticed, from some of our loyal listeners. So Mike, maybe you can talk a little bit about going forward, some future sessions.
Yeah, we're in the planning stage. We're going to take a week off at least to see what kind of themes and topics we can generate for future programming, and maybe invite other subject matter experts online to participate. Again, the purpose of doing this, to do these call-in shows, to create awareness about the Webequie Supply Road, all the associated studies, both on the provincial and the federal, but also to create awareness about the surveys that are coming up. These are very important surveys, ways of participating in in the environmental assessment. Hence why we sort of concluded with the socioeconomics survey, just to give a taste of what it's about and some insight around that. But there will be a survey, and we'll be talking about that in different formats. I would really get our listeners to follow us on social media as our primary ways of creating awareness at hashtag WFN Supply Road. And as also come to our website. We have lots of information on the website. We're going to be updating and doing more EA video tutorials, more translations and fact sheets. So we're going to take a week or so to focus back on those platforms and then update them with new content, and then roll out a kind of a program, for the Wawate Foreign Show.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Mike. And we will talk to everyone soon.
Yeah.
So
I want to thank Tony for helping us out.
Tony in the control room over there. Yes. Thank you, Tony, for all your support and pulling us through this. And we will talk to you soon.
Are you scratching your head, looking for more information on the Webequie Supply Road and the terminal?